When a practitioner reaches a position of great honor and receives widespread respect, that very position can become an unexpected danger. High status quietly nourishes pride. As pride grows, it gradually opens the door for every other craving. The desire for wealth, attachment to physical beauty, cravings for luxurious food, little by little these passions become stronger. Eventually, desire overwhelms wisdom. At that point, moral collapse becomes only a matter of time. Outwardly, such a person still appears to be a revered and virtuous monk. Everyone praises him as holy. People admire his lofty virtue. Yet inwardly, his mind may already be overflowing with corrupt intentions. Knowing full well the terrible consequences, he still dares to commit sexual misconduct. He steals the property of the 3 jewels to support his lover. He eats meat, drinks alcohol, violates the monastic precepts, and disgraces the Buddha's teachings. Once such deeds have been committed, the law of cause and effect does not overlook even the smallest detail. Every action is accounted for with absolute precision. Thus he must endure decades of suffering in hell. Even after leaving hell, the remaining karma continues to follow him through many future lifetimes. Only then does one truly realize how easy it is to speak the word cultivation, yet how extraordinarily difficult genuine spiritual practice really is. King Qinguang continued his judgment.
Listen carefully to my decree. While serving as an abbot, you became infatuated with women's beauty. Therefore, your punishment is blindness. As the respected abbot of a monastery belonging to the 3 jewels, you secretly went each night to a woman's house to eat meat and drink wine. You even declared, animals exist to nourish people. Instead of setting an example for others, you encouraged them to commit evil. Therefore, your punishment is muteness. Though you had left home to follow the Buddha, you still delighted in listening to the soft, seductive voices of women. Therefore, your punishment is deafness. However, because you awakened in time, sincerely repented, practiced according to the Buddha's teachings, and made the great vow to repay all your karma within one lifetime, your lifespan has not yet ended. Therefore, you are permitted to return to the human world. Go back and become an example for humanity. If you continue cultivating diligently and later return here, your case will be reviewed again.
Hearing that she would be allowed to return to the human world, yet would become blind, mute, and deaf, Musbar felt both joy and sorrow. She earnestly pleaded, "Your Majesty, I willingly accept being mute and deaf. But I humbly beg for mercy regarding blindness." King Qinguang replied,
"Your karmic consequences cannot be altered by me. Go and ask the Bodhisattva."
Musbar immediately hurried to Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva and respectfully prayed. The Bodhisattva asked, "Why do you wish to keep your eyesight?" She answered, "Revered Bodhisattva, I have witnessed the unbearable suffering of beings in hell. I wish to keep my eyesight so that I may read and recite the Lotus Sutra, dedicating its merit to help those beings attain liberation." At that moment, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva spoke.
If you truly make such a great vow, then your heart must first be purified by fire.
Immediately afterward, one of the divine attendants approached carrying a tray resembling a ceremonial offering tray and knelt before the bodhisattvas. Another divine being picked up a black lump from the tray. It was engulfed in blazing flames. The deity handed it to Musbar and instructed her to swallow it. She was terrified at the sight of the fire, yet she dared not refuse. She opened her mouth and swallowed it. Instantly, an unbearable burning sensation spread throughout her entire body. Flames seemed to surge from her feet to the top of her head. The pain was so intense that she felt as though she would lose consciousness from terror. The divine attendant then picked up a second black lump, also blazing with fire, and ordered her to swallow it. Again she obeyed. The agony returned just as fiercely. A third black lump followed, burning exactly the same way. The suffering became so overwhelming that she could no longer remain standing. She collapsed onto the ground. Then came a fourth lump. This one was white. Although it too was surrounded by flames, when she swallowed it, she felt no heat whatsoever. It passed down as naturally as an ordinary mouthful of rice. The dozens of lumps that followed were also white. Among them was only one red lump. None of these caused any pain. When the entire ritual was finished, the karma that would have resulted in blindness had been eliminated. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva then explained, the 3 black lumps represent the 3 poisons that still remain within your mind: greed, hatred, delusion. The single red lump signifies that you will eventually be reborn in the heavenly realms. The 36 white lumps symbolize the purity that has already arisen within your heart. Because you have become deeply fearful of karmic consequences, you are now firmly determined to cultivate the Dharma. Worldly desires no longer occupy your mind. This is good. However, you must continue practicing diligently until those 3 black lumps are transformed into white. Only then will your mind become completely pure. And because of the great vow you made in your previous life, you must now go and liberate the beings imprisoned within hell. Musbar was bewildered. She could not imagine what it meant to liberate hell. No matter how hard she thought, she could not understand. Finally, she resolved to do the only thing she truly knew. She would continue reciting the Buddha's name. She then went to King Qinguang to receive an official seal of authority. Afterward, 18 divine beings were assigned to accompany her as guides through the various hells. Hell was not merely a single place. It was an immense world unto itself. Above stretched a gloomy, oppressive sky. Below, foul and putrid odors rose from every direction. Everywhere stood enormous underworld guardians. Some had the heads of oxen. Others possessed horse faces. Still others bore strange and terrifying forms unlike anything found in the human world. Merely looking at them caused one's heart to pound with fear. Hell consisted of many different regions. People in the human world often speak of the 18 levels of hell, but Musbar realized this description was not entirely accurate. These realms were not stacked one above another like floors of a building. Nor were there only 18. There were vast great hells, stretching farther than the eye could see. Within each great hell were countless smaller hells where different karmic offenses received different punishments. After a soul completed its sentence in one hell, if additional karma remained, it would immediately be transferred to another hell to continue receiving punishment. The first 3 realms she visited were not places of torture. Instead, they served as places where souls were held while awaiting judgment. The first prison contained 4 categories of spirits. The accompanying deity explained them one by one. The first category consisted of those who had died naturally after completing their lifespan and had never murdered another human being. The second category consisted of those who had not killed anyone in previous lives but had themselves been murdered during the present lifetime. The third category consisted of those who had murdered others in previous lives and were therefore themselves killed in return during the current life. The fourth category consisted of spirits who had died unjustly but refused to descend into the underworld. Instead, they wandered among the living, disturbing and frightening people. Only after the divine officials finally captured them were they brought here for punishment. After judgment was completed, these souls were transferred to the second prison. From there, divine officials escorted them according to the sentences they had received. Some were reborn as human beings. Some became animals. Others ascended to heavenly realms. Still others were sent directly into the various hells for punishment. One of the accompanying deities pointed toward the spirits who had died unjustly and explained.
If someone was murdered despite never having killed another person, yet harbors no hatred, does not seek revenge, and willingly forgives, then even if that soul has committed other offenses, it may receive amnesty and be reborn in a virtuous human realm to continue cultivation. Only the gravest offenses, such as the 5 heinous crimes, cannot be erased. But those who insist upon seeking revenge cannot receive such mercy.
Musbar nodded thoughtfully. Only then did she fully understand the immeasurable value of forgiveness. When one sincerely forgives others, one's own karmic burdens may also be lightened. The third prison housed souls who had already completed punishments in other hells. They remained there while awaiting further review and whatever sentence still remained. In each of these first 3 prisons, Musbar walked among the countless spirits and called out loudly, "Everyone! I regard all of you as though you were my own relatives. Please recite the Buddha's name. Only through reciting the Buddha's name can your karmic suffering begin to disappear. Repeat after me. Namo Amitabha Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. the hearer of the world's cries and savior from suffering. Namo Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva of great vows. Many spirits immediately followed her. At first only a few voices joined in. Soon small groups were chanting together. Before long, the sound of the Buddha's name echoed throughout the prisons. Yet not every spirit was willing to recite. Those who sincerely joined the chanting were released from imprisonment after only a short time. Those who stubbornly refused remained where they were. The fourth hell was reserved for those who, during their lifetime, had wasted, discarded, or deliberately destroyed food and drink. Their punishment was horrifying. They were forced to eat maggots. Everywhere Ms. Bar looked were enormous jars and vats overflowing with writhing maggots, emitting a nauseating stench. According to the amount of food each person had wasted while alive, the punishment varied. Some were required to consume only one small jar. Others faced several large vats. Those whose karma was especially heavy had mountains of maggot-filled jars stacked before them, as numerous as the stalls in Mount Market. This hell also punished those who had earned a living by brewing alcohol. Their sentence was to drink enormous vats of liquor. Some had to finish 2 or 3 vats. Others were assigned 5 or 7. For the worst offenders, the rows of vats stretched for miles. Of course, the liquor of hell bore no resemblance to anything pleasant. Although Ms. Bar never tasted it herself, the agonized screams of the condemned souls made it obvious that the torment was unimaginable. As she had done in the earlier prisons, Ms. Bar walked throughout the area encouraging the suffering souls to recite the Buddha's name. She chanted aloud so they could follow her. Whenever a soul sincerely began reciting, something miraculous happened. The maggots inside the jars disappeared. The liquor gradually vanished from the vats. Witnessing these extraordinary changes, the condemned souls eagerly told one another. Soon, the sound of Buddha recitation spread throughout the entire hell. A great number of souls were liberated from their punishment. The fifth hell. The fifth hell punished those who had slandered others, fabricated accusations, distorted the truth, or caused innocent people to be imprisoned. Each condemned soul wore an enormous wooden can fastened around the neck. The heavy wooden frame was almost impossible to carry. Behind them, underworld guards lashed them mercilessly with whips, forcing them to continue walking. Every single step was accompanied by another blow. Their entire bodies became soaked with blood. They staggered forward in unbearable pain. Anyone who collapsed from exhaustion was beaten even more savagely. The guards continued striking until bones shattered and flesh was torn apart. Whenever a soul died from the torture, the guards revived it through supernatural power. The can was placed upon its neck once again. The whipping resumed. This cycle repeated endlessly. For some, the punishment lasted only several years. For others, several decades. For still others, tens of thousands, even billions of years, depending upon the weight of their karma. This hell also imprisoned those who, while alive, had kept birds and animals confined in cages merely for amusement, satisfying themselves with the sight of captive creatures. Now they themselves were locked inside iron cages, weeping bitterly as they endured the very suffering they had once imposed upon others. When Ms. Bar encouraged them to recite the Buddha's name, many obeyed. As soon as they did, their heavy shackles fell away. The iron cages shattered. They, too, were released. The sixth hell. The sixth hell was engulfed entirely in fire. Flames blazed everywhere. The intense heat was so overwhelming that even Ms. Bar could scarcely bear it. This realm primarily punished those who had killed living beings, cattle, buffaloes, pigs, dogs, chickens, ducks, snakes, turtles, and countless other creatures. It also punished other serious offenses, including filial impiety, insulting or abandoning one's parents, and wasting wealth through reckless extravagance. Towering mountains rose throughout this hell. From the ground below, blazing flames erupted continuously. At the center of each mountain stood a gigantic pillar of glowing copper, heated until it shone bright red, the hottest object imaginable. Those who had merely eaten meat without personally slaughtering animals were thrown onto the burning mountains. Those who had both killed and eaten animals were hurled directly onto the incandescent copper pillars. As their flesh touched the burning metal, it sizzled and burned. The air was filled with the sound of flesh scorching. Terrified screams echoed everywhere. The unbearable stench of burning bodies filled the atmosphere. It was a scene beyond horror. While alive, these people had roasted, fried, and cooked animals, thinking only of the delicious taste upon their tongues. They had never paused to consider the agony endured by the creatures they killed. Now, as the wheel of karma turned back upon them, they experienced that same suffering, but on a far more terrible scale. How frightening it was, yet so few people in the human world gave any thought to such consequences. While alive, when compassionate people advised them to adopt a vegetarian diet or stop killing living beings, they laughed. They remained silent, or they invented countless excuses. It is necessary for my health. It is unavoidable because of business. There is no other choice. But once they arrived here, none of those excuses carried the slightest meaning. The flames of hell and the underworld guards listened to no explanations. Musbar hurried from place to place urging the condemned souls to recite the Buddha's name. Yet here it proved exceedingly difficult. Their karmic burdens were simply too heavy. Most could not even form the words. Only a small number whose karma was lighter, those standing near the outer edges of the fiery mountains, managed to recite sincerely and escape their punishment. Unable to help the others, she reluctantly continued onward. A short distance later, she encountered a large group of people tending herds of cattle, pigs, chickens, ducks, and other domestic animals. Surprised, she asked, "Why are people raising livestock here in hell?" One of the accompanying deities explained.
These are people who, while alive, raised animals for profit without slaughtering them personally. They must remain here caring for these animals until each creature completes its animal karma and is reborn elsewhere. This is only one part of their punishment. They still have other karmic offenses and must later endure punishment in other hells as well.
A little farther on, Musbar came upon a scene that was both strange and tragic. A large crowd of condemned souls was being forced by underworld guards to sing continuously. They had to keep singing without stopping. The moment anyone faltered or became unable to continue, the guards rushed forward and beat that person mercilessly. The blows continued until the soul died. The soul was then revived and forced to begin singing again. The endless cycle repeated over and over. One of the accompanying deities explained.
These are people who, while alive, possessed wealth and spent their money attending performances and entertainment that aroused lust and sensual desire, allowing themselves to become intoxicated by worldly pleasures. Had they instead used that wealth to give charity to the poor, print Buddhist scriptures, commission Buddha images, or support temples and monastics in their cultivation, how wonderful that would have been. After death they could have been reborn in the heavenly realms, continued practicing the Dharma in future lives, and eventually attained nirvana. Instead, they wasted their wealth on meaningless pleasures and have now fallen into hell.
Continuing onward, Musbar eventually came to a bridge. It was called Naya Bridge. The bridge had no railings whatsoever, making it appear extremely precarious. Rather than spanning a river, it crossed a vast chasm measuring roughly 5 acres in width, perhaps even larger. Below the bridge gathered countless animals: elephants, tigers, leopards, horses, goats, pigs, chickens, ducks, dogs, cats, snakes, centipedes. Every imaginable species stood below in separate groups. Each watched the bridge intently, eagerly waiting for anyone to fall. The instant someone slipped, the entire group of that particular species would pounce. Musbar was led onto the bridge together with many condemned souls. Whenever someone who had killed dogs during life reached the section above the pack of dogs, the force of karma caused that person to lose balance and fall. Immediately the dogs leaped upon the victim. They bit, tore, and ripped the soul into countless pieces. Blood and flesh were scattered everywhere. Likewise, those who had slaughtered cattle or buffaloes fell among herds of those very animals. They were though read by horns, trampled beneath hooves, until they died. Those who had killed snakes tumbled into masses of writhing serpents. Their bodies became completely covered. They were bitten repeatedly, crushed by tightening coils. Everywhere beneath the bridge unfolded scenes of unspeakable horror. Elephants trumpeted as they crushed souls beneath their enormous feet. Tigers roared while leaping upon victims and tearing them apart. Buffaloes and goats lowered their horns and charged relentlessly. Birds, chickens, and ducks pecked with sharp beaks and slashed with powerful claws. Above, the condemned souls crossed the bridge trembling with terror, never knowing when karma would cause them to fall. Musbah herself also had to cross the bridge. Fortunately, all of the chickens and ducks she had once killed had already received liberation through the merit she dedicated to them. She safely crossed the entire bridge without falling. Even so, the experience left her deeply shaken. While she was still crossing, a strange creature suddenly approached her. It had the body of a human but the head of a dog. Its face seemed strangely familiar. The creature spoke.
Musbah, I am N, the dog. Have you forgotten me?
Only then did she recognize him. He had been one of the dogs living at the temple. Whenever she visited, she often petted him. Eventually he had died after eating poisoned bait. She exclaimed, N, you've been dead for so long. Why are you still here? He answered.
In my previous life I was a disciple of Master GT. Because I greedily stole property belonging to the three jewels, I was reborn as a dog to guard the temple. My karmic term had not yet ended. Then a man poisoned me to death. I have remained here waiting for him to descend so I can take revenge.
Musbah gently replied, please let go of your hatred. Ask to be reborn instead. Why continue waiting in bitterness? Must you remain here forever? They spoke only briefly before she continued onward. One of the accompanying deities then said,
Now you have seen how greatly beings suffer because of killing. When you return to the human world, teach people never to kill living creatures. Also tell them not to burn paper money or paper offerings. Such practices create only karma, not merit.
Soon afterward they arrived at the seventh hell. The overpowering smell of blood struck Musbah before she even entered. Everywhere she looked were gruesome scenes of torture. Tongues were cut out, teeth were broken, eyes were gouged, ears were sliced away, noses were severed, intestines were torn from bodies. Towering underworld guards wielded swords, knives, iron hooks, pincers, and cleavers. They held the condemned down while carrying out these punishments without pause. The souls screamed in unbearable agony. Blood flowed like rivers. Whenever an eye, ear, or tongue had been completely destroyed, it instantly regenerated, only to be mutilated again. Some souls were hacked apart until their bodies became unrecognizable masses of flesh. Then a god sprinkled a mysterious liquid upon them. Immediately they returned to life, whole once again, only to endure the same torture all over again. Thus, countless times each day, they died. And countless times they lived again. The punishments never ceased. By this point, the spiritual power that Musbah had accumulated through years of reciting sutras, chanting mantras, and invoking the Buddha's name had begun to diminish. She felt utterly exhausted. Nevertheless, she gritted her teeth and continued forward. After walking some distance, she suddenly saw someone she recognized. It was her maternal uncle, who had died only 2 months earlier. At that very moment, underworld guards were driving a knife deep into his abdomen. Another guard thrust a bony hand into the wound and slowly pulled out his intestines piece by piece. Above him, a second guard forced open his mouth with a huge pair of iron pincers and snapped off his teeth one after another. The cracking sounds echoed horribly. Blood poured from both his mouth and his abdomen, spreading across the ground. The sight was too much for Musbah to bear. Filled with fear and grief for her uncle, she collapsed unconscious. The accompanying deities carried her to meet King Taishan, the ruler of the seventh court of hell, who governed this realm. When she regained consciousness, she respectfully pleaded, Your Majesty, please allow me to return to the prison. King Taishan gently refused.
No, your spiritual power has already weakened. You must return to cultivate further.
Musbah continued, My uncle died in the second lunar month. He is suffering punishment in this prison. Please allow me to visit him. The king replied.
There is no need. I shall have the underworld guards bring him here.
The guards obeyed at once. When her uncle was brought before her, Musbar hurried toward him and asked, "Uncle, you always told everyone that you had recited the Lotus Sutra for 40 years. Why then have you fallen into hell?" Her uncle answered weakly,
"I lied. It is because I lied that I am now suffering the punishment of having my teeth broken. I also looked down upon other people with arrogance. Furthermore, when I practiced medicine, I charged outrageously high fees and exploited those who were suffering. When you return to the human world, tell my sons K and C to sell all of my property. Have them use the money to prepare vegetarian meals for charity, release living beings, print Buddhist scriptures, and make offerings to temples. Dedicate all of that merit to me. Everything I owned was earned from the sweat and tears of others. I exploited them far too much."
Musbar replied, "Please continue reciting the Buddha's name. When I return to the human world, I will chant sutras and dedicate the merit to help liberate you. I fear your sons may not believe what I tell them." At that moment, King Taishan spoke.
"The beings of Jambudvipa are truly deluded. They imagine that death is the end of everything. Therefore they boldly commit countless evil deeds. Only after descending into hell do they begin to regret, but by then it is already too late. When you return to the human world, convey my message to all people. Every day they should devote at least 1 hour, or even half an hour, to spiritual cultivation. They may recite the Buddha's name, chant sutras, or uphold sacred mantras. Also advise them not to burn paper money or paper offerings for their deceased relatives. Otherwise, would that not imply that King Qinguang of the first court accepts bribes from the living? If people truly wish to help their departed parents and ancestors attain liberation, they should instead give charity to the poor, support temples and monastics, print Buddhist scriptures, or release living beings. Then they should dedicate the resulting merit to the deceased. Even parents and grandparents who have died many years ago may still benefit from such wholesome deeds."
After bidding farewell to her uncle and respectfully taking leave of King Taishan, Musbar returned once more to the first court. When she arrived, King Qinguang asked,
"You have now seen the punishments of hell. Tell me honestly, do you believe they are just?"
Musbar respectfully answered, "Your Majesty, every punishment is perfectly fair. Yet seeing living beings endure such terrible suffering fills my heart with profound sorrow." King Qinguang replied,
"While alive, people concern themselves only with satisfying their temporary physical bodies. To do so, they commit every imaginable evil, killing living beings. Robbery, murder, endless greed. They wish to possess the wealth of others without laboring themselves, simply so that their families and friends may enjoy comfort. In the end, their consciousness falls into hell. As for you, originally you were sentenced to remain mute and deaf for 10 years after returning to the human world. However, because you opened the first 7 gates of hell and helped liberate countless beings, your punishment has been reduced. You will now remain mute and deaf for only 3 years. After that, your case will be reviewed again. If you continue cultivating diligently, and if your family also practices virtue and refrains from killing, your punishment may be reduced even further. Otherwise, these disabilities will remain with you for the rest of your life. You acknowledged your sins and sincerely repented. Yet many souls arrive here still denying everything. In such cases, I simply allow them to gaze into the mirror revealing past deeds. There they witness every action they performed while alive. At that point, they have no way to deny their guilt. Many then beg to return to the human world so they can donate their wealth to temples and perform wholesome deeds. But by then their physical bodies have already decayed. Once a soul leaves the body, the underworld officials reduce it to a tiny size and place it inside a magical gourd. It is then taken before the king of Mount Dongyu, afterward to the king of Mount Siyu, and finally brought before me for judgment. Nearly a month has usually passed by then. The body has already decomposed. There is no possibility of returning. Then they are taken to the Tower of Homesickness, where they look back toward the human world. They see that their husband has remarried, or their wife has taken another husband. Their children have squandered the family fortune. Their wealth has vanished. Human affection has drifted away like passing clouds. At that moment, they can do nothing but lower their heads and weep.
When the allotted time had come to an end, Musbar respectfully took her leave of King Qinguang. She then returned to the place where Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva and Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva were seated. After bowing deeply before the two bodhisattvas and asking permission to return to the human world, she prepared to depart.